Hey everybody, welcome to BODS Mayhem Hour. I'm your host, John the Bod, aka the Bod Father. As always, bring you guys awesome interviews. And today we have an awesome interview lined up for you guys and gals. First off, I want to say happy Halloween to all you little ghouls and goblinettes out there. Be sure to go out and TP somebody's house, and you can blame me, I don't care. It's in the spirit of the fun. So it's Halloween, folks. And we got an awesome interview lined up for you guys and gals, like I said. This lady has played in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. She's also played in Contracted, Hatchet 3, Leatherface, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3, which she was a reporter, was uncredited on it. Leprechaun 3, Blood Valley, Siege Revenge. Tales of Halloween, which came out last year, which is a good little, mini-series, if you want to call it that. Stepfather 2, and last but not least, like I said, these are just some of the movies she's been in. Tales of Poe. So without further ado, Miss Caroline Williams. How you doing, Caroline?
Thank you, John. I'm happy to be on your show.
Happy Halloween.
Oh, happy Halloween season. Listen, Halloween for me, Halloween is my Christmas. And the Halloween season, it's always convention season. There's always a lot of travel. A lot of great movies come out. It's just the most exciting and fun time of year. So right back at you. I hope you have a wonderful Rocktober.
There you go. Finally, yeah, mix in some metal music, some horror music, Rocktoberish.
Absolutely, man.
You got to get it going. So, is Halloween for you like every day, like all of us horror fans? It's got to be.
I mean, on the one hand, yes, it is. I will tell you, after the first of the year, after New Year's Day, I feel a little depressed because it's just going to take so long to get back. It's going to take so long to get back to Halloween. But, we finally get here. The time goes by fast. For me, first day of fall begins my Halloween season. And I keep my Halloween decorations up until Thanksgiving.
That's awesome.
And then after Thanksgiving, I'll start doing like Christmas stuff. But I try to put off all the other holidays as long as I possibly can and keep Halloween going as long as I possibly can. So I always feel really excited that it's coming, and then I try to make it last as long as I can, and then, God, I just get so depressed when it takes the rest of the year for it to come back.
I saw a Christmas commercial the other day. I'm like, come on, fat boy, your month's not here yet. Come on.
Listen, man, Walmart started moving in their decorations almost last month out here.
Jeez.
I couldn't believe it.
Yeah, that's when they start their layaway.
A couple of shelves of Christmas things. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah, that's when they start their layaways in August, actually, for Christmas. So
I guess so.
That is insane.
I know, it's just nutty.
So let's jump right into this. I want to go just go back a little bit here. What led you to get into acting and becoming an actress? Was it just something that you wanted to do, or was it just something I'm going to try it and see how it works out?
I'm like every single kid growing up anywhere in the world. When you're a little kid, you love to imagine things, and you can scare yourself, or you can make yourself laugh your ass off, or you're always playing. You've always got your imagination on fire, right? And I really never wanted it to go away. Now, if you're going to go into the working world and be an adult and buy a house and have a car and do all that stuff, you've got to be able to direct all that into whatever job it is that you're doing. And, being a working and productive person is a creative act. You've got to be able to you've got to make a lot of people happy, especially if you're working with the public, and especially if you've got a boss. If you're manufacturing products, you can't screw them up. The tires can't fall off the car. I mean, you got to do everything right. And I know how I feel like when my dry cleaning comes back wrong, when it's right, and, you can tell people are really happy that you're happy with the stuff they do. But I had a tough time trying to keep a regular job. I wanted to play. All I wanted to do was play. And I found acting classes at Chris Wilson Studio for Actors in Houston. And I had also seen, Urban Cowboy had shot in Houston, and a lot of other movies were coming in and out of Houston.
Oh, wow.
And I would meet these people once in a while, and I would meet the people in Houston who worked in show business, no matter how tangentially they work. And there were talent agencies in Houston, which was shocking to me because, you know, that was mostly industrial films and TV commercials and voiceovers and things like that. But I thought, wow, there's a possibility here. And even if I don't go anywhere but Houston, why don't I just try it and see what happens? And my whole career has been about, why don't I just try it and see what happens?
You ain't gonna ride that bull, sissy.
Say again?
Said you ain't gonna ride that bull, sissy.
You ain't gonna ride that bull. Where are you from?
I'm from Kentucky, actually, so.
Oh, lovely. Oh, I love that.
You know,
I love that.
I'm going to say it right here, folks. I don't care. I'm a horror guy, and I love metal music and horror music and stuff, but I love Urban Cowboy. I love that movie. I don't care.
Oh, it is. Listen, it is very sexy. And John Travolta, for being a gay man, gets more heavy-duty, sexy, straight gal action. I probably shouldn't have said that, but everybody knows, so it doesn't really matter. But seriously, I mean, yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, good. And the actual soundtrack to that movie's pretty badass too. So yeah, go ahead and ridicule me. I don't care,
Stigwood,
folks.
what can I say?
So, what was your thoughts on the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre from '74 when you first seen it, or if you saw it, getting this, you know, and plus actually getting into this role? What's your thoughts on that? Seeing it or not being, you know, and not seeing it to actually getting this role?
I hadn't seen the entire thing, but in 1974, I was a junior in high school, and I was dating a guy who was a junior at the University of Texas, and he played football for the Longhorns, and he was my boyfriend. And I went up to Austin for Texas OU weekend, believe it or not, to watch the game, go to parties, hang out, and then drive back the next day with his parents. And after the game was over, we went to a party, walked in, and somebody had a bootleg copy of the movie on a projector, and they were projecting it onto a sheet that was up against the wall. And I walk in just in time to see Pam go on the hook. And I'd never seen anything like that in a movie before. I'd seen violence in movies before, but I'd never seen anything like that. You know, I was really taken aback, and it was shot in such cinema verite style. It looked so real that, I mean, it just looked so real. It was like, it felt like being somebody standing in a closet watching all this happen, you know, and it freaked me out a little bit, you know. So that was my first experience with the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And I would not see it in its entirety for the first time until well into, oh gosh, was it even out on DVD in the 80s? I don't recall.
I don't think so. I would say it's on VHS. And then after that, it probably, I think early 90s maybe.
It was probably on VHS. The first time that I ever saw it all the way through was on one of the movie channels on television. You know what? I think I saw it on Z Channel. Do you remember Z Channel?
I don't remember
Z Channel. Z Channel was one of the very first movie content providers on cable television. Cable television was super primitive. And it had MTV and like CNN and Z Channel. And Z Channel showed all these crazy avant-garde movies that were cheap for them to license, and that's how they could afford to show them. And one of them was Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And it was the first time I'd ever seen it. I had moved out here, maybe it was 1990, something like that. I don't know. But, and it still, you know, horror still carried a certain, and in many ways still carries a certain, you know, what's the word? Sort of low rent, low class trailer park thing. They don't have a lot of respect for us, but that's what makes it so satisfying to see a movie like it make $500 million domestically alone. That's going to be more than $1 billion movie. And Aronofsky just did Mother, and it fell to shit. I mean, you know, there you go.
What kills me is that, like you said, a lot of horror stuff don't get a lot of respect, but if you go back and you look at all these horror movies, all these big actors and actresses, guess where they got their start, folks? Horror movies.
Always, man.
Yeah, or either some soft, you know, porn action, whatever, stuff like that. That's where they got their starts. So,
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly.
So how did you get into the role on Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2? Let's talk about that a little bit. How did that end up, you getting a chance with that one?
Well, they decided to do a sequel. And Toby had always wanted to do one, and he had a contract with Cannon Films. Cannon was a big upstart out here in L.A., and they were doing a lot of very successful but very cheap films. And they hired Toby to do a whole menu of films. And Toby said, great, I'll do all of your movies, but I want to do a sequel to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Because other people had been doing, little knockoffs of it and stuff like that. And he thought, I better plant my flag with this thing before I lose the rights, because the original rights to the original film bounced around, to dozens of different people. Toby stopped owning the movie once it was distributed.
Wow.
But he did hold on to the trademark, and he did hold on to the title and the original characters. So when it came up for auditions, my agent sent me, and it's a very famous audition story. You can see it on my IMDb page. And while you're there, throw me a like. But it's a very, very famous story. I ran screaming down the hallway and ran into the room and pulled the chairs out from under Toby and Kit and played the action of the scene instead of, because the only dialogue was they live on fear, but there were 3 pages of action. There was, she was running and jumping and hiding and getting weapons and, locking doors and going, there was a lot of stuff going on, but she wasn't necessarily talking. And it was apparent to me that the other girls going in and out, were not working that angle. So that's the direction that I took it in, and I got cast. I think they were looking for an actress who recognized it was going to be an action film and was athletic and was going to be able to do it, because it's a very physically demanding part, and my character is in nearly every single frame of the movie. I had more screen time than any other character in the film, so you got to be ready for that too. It's a lot of work.
She's pretty badass in this movie too, if you ask me.
Well, she was different from the Jamie Lee Curtis character in John Carpenter's Halloween, Laurie Strode. Laurie Strode was a very intellectual, because all of her action takes place basically in the same house. She's just in a house. She's not out running through the neighborhood in an underground lair and all the other places. She's in a house trying to escape Michael Myers, hiding throughout this house. And so what Laurie Strode had to do is her mental clockwork had to be pinging all the time. And you can see it. And it's what makes her such a wonderful character, is that she is calculating and recalculating constantly. Stretch is smart, but abundantly clearly not smart when she goes in pursuit of the Chainsaw Family and the guys who murder LG, and take him off. So it's a much more physical part, and Stretch's story takes her through many different locations, many different actions, tumbling down a long tunnel, falling down into the smokehouse, driving out to Texas Battleland. She goes with her little radio station to cover the chili cook-off. She runs through the underground lair. She's constantly getting in fights and defending herself and all that stuff. So, yeah, very, very physical.
That's my next question I was going to ask. How was working on the set day by day on this? I know it had to be grueling, heat-wise and stuff, but let's talk about that a little bit if you don't mind.
Well, the thing is, I'm a Texas girl, and I spent part of my childhood in the South, in Arkansas, Mississippi. I was born in Arkansas. My family moved to Mississippi for a brief time, and then I spent most of my life in Texas until I moved to California. So heat, humidity, weather conditions like that are hospitable to me. It doesn't bother me, and it's not going to get to me. And plus, I was, and still am, basically, a very athletic person and very physical, and I like working out, and I like being, running and jumping and playing and having a good time. So, it was play for me largely. It was hot and it was demanding, but I never complained, because I always knew I was luckier than the 450 other girls who had auditioned for the part. And I was working for Tobe Hooper, who made the original. So I knew a lot of people were going to come out and see the movie. And it was a great story and a great character. It was it was the opportunity of a lifetime, but it was also the time of my life. I had a terrific time. As I am fond of saying, and as I said to Toby Hooper the night before he died, because we talked on the phone, he gave me everything I have. Nothing in my life was the same after I made that movie.
I would say not. I would say not, because it's just like we talked about. That's how doors open, and things like that.
Yeah.
Here,
And that was a big door.
oh,
Big door.
Oh, I can imagine. 60s and 70s when these movies were being made, and even in the 50s, a lot of these movies were indie made. So do you think that people were lived a little timid on the horror movies being put out as indie films and kind of strayed away when Texas Chainsaw 2 came out, possibly? Did you see that any at all?
Well, the thing is indie, the indie film business in many ways started in Texas with Toby, with Eagle Pennell, who had also done 2 movies with Lou Perriman, who played LG. They made 2 movies, The Whole Shooting Match and Last Night at the Alamo, both remarkable pictures that Robert Redford saw and were his inspiration for creating the Sundance Institute. And he has been quoted saying that in interviews. Toby chose to make a horror film, number 1, because he loved the allegory behind it, and number 2, because everybody likes a good ghost story, and especially Southerners. I mean, there's just something about the storytelling tradition of the South that lends itself to ghost stories. And, Edgar Allan Poe was a Southerner. He lived in Maryland. So it's very traditional to go to for horror to be a default resource for making films. But Toby had done 2 or 3 other films, The Heisters, Eggshells. There was another one whose name escapes me right now, but he and Kim Henkel became friends and hooked up. Toby was teaching film at Southwestern University, and they became good friends, and Kim was always a great writer. But once they became friends and started working, and they met Eagle Pennell, and they knew what was going on in Texas, they decided, hey, let's do one of our own. And there were some incredibly talented people to work with. Daniel Pearl as the DP cinematographer. To this day, the technique of that film is taught in film school. And it was Danny Pearl's very first feature film. Sound design by Wayne Bell. Hair and makeup was on the fly. I don't even know who was responsible for that, but Bob Burns was the art director and set designer and set dresser, and came up with the overall look of the film. Had to find the houses that they shot at. Had to find the gas station, which, by the way, still stands in Bastrop, Texas, bought by an entrepreneur named Roy Rose, who put a great deal of money into it to bring it back to its original glory. And it's now sort of the Hill Country Horror Central, sort of the clubhouse of the horror crowd in Texas.
I saw that.
He's got a campground. He's got barbecue. And I will be there this weekend at the Bastrop Civic Center with a host of Chainsaw alumni to sign and have a good time. And there's going to be music and fun and barbecue. And we're going to have photo ops on the bridge from Chainsaw 2, where the great Saw beheading takes place. But yeah, Bob Burns created the look of that movie, and these are some remarkable talents, and so it's to have a part of that as my legacy is a real point of pride for me.
Yeah, I don't want to throw off on the interview here or anything like that, but when you mention ghost stories of being part of the South, like we're Southerners, I absolutely love the history of Southern, states and everything, Civil War stuff like that. I absolutely eat it up. And I was a paranormal investigator there for a while.
Oh wow! Well, God knows you got plenty of resources, plenty of places to go.
Mm-hmm. I liked doing the investigations on for like Civil War stuff, but in the back of my mind, I felt kind of disrespectful. You know what I'm saying? It's kind of like taboo deal, but I did it. It was just some amazing stuff that we actually got, and it still surprises me and impresses me to this day on some of the stuff. Actual cannon fire you hear, it's wild.
Well, I have to say, I mean, I grew up being brought up by very well-educated people on my father's side of the family and not very well-educated people on my mother's side of the family, both of whom were deeply spiritual people, and they believed in God, and they believed in spirit, and they believed in the soul, and they believed in the transitioning of the soul. And to this day, one of my cousins is a noted spiritualist in Arkansas. She will do a card reading for you or read your palm at the drop of a hat. And she's got a gift, I believe. Mm-hmm. I just think it's in a way, it sounds weird, but it's an alternative form of prayer. It's just a different spirit life. Sure. And a different spiritual resource, perhaps. Because I can tell you, as a Southern girl, and all the Southern girls I know, every time I go to a convention, we get there early enough that I can usually take a cemetery tour somewhere. And especially when I'm at the graves of children, because people lost their children all the time in the old days because there was not, even adequate medical care most of the time. And when you look at these beautiful monuments, these beautiful works of art that were so painstakingly carved and painted and decorated and placed and in such deliberate fashion, you can feel the spirits and the grief and the longing of these people who were before us.
Exactly. Yeah, I agree with you.
So that is not lost on me. That is not lost on me.
I agree with you 1,000%. There's some pictures that you see and nobody's smiling. When people ask me, well, why ain't they smiling? I mean, you're looking at something back in the 30s and 40s. I mean, what did they have to smile about? I mean, that was a rough time.
I have to tell you, I've got an ancient photo album, and I can't really call it, they're linotypes and tintypes,
Oh, wow.
These photos. And yeah, they're from the 1880s is the date of most of the photos that were taken. And there is a photo of a young woman holding her baby, and they appear to be sleeping, but they're not sleeping. They're dead.
Yeah, they're dead. Yeah. How creepy.
Oh. This girl had to have been in her teens, and she had to have lost her baby. I mean, the baby looked like a kind of a brand new baby, or not a very old baby. And I thought, oh my God, can you imagine being the mother of this teenage girl, and this is your grandbaby, and now they're both gone.
Yep.
You can just feel it coming to you through the photo. I mean, it's just, oh my God. And, looking at family members that I remember as a small child meeting these people. They were quite old, but I remember meeting these people. And there they are, as children.
Yep.
And it's just, boy, it really brings you to the center of life and what life really means,
It truly does.
And I love that stuff. Now, getting back to horror, I think the reason we love horror and embrace horror is we recognize, within the spiritual realm, there are benign and affectionate and loving presences, but there are also evil presences. There is evil in the world. Mm-hmm. Evil has no conscience. Whenever I hear people say stuff like, oh, he'll go to jail and he'll feel bad about his crime the rest of his life. No, he won't.
Exactly.
He was sufficiently without conscience to do this shit in the first place.
Exactly.
I would feel bad walking out of a store without paying for something.
Yep.
So killing somebody come on. So the beauty of horror is horror confronts evil honestly and absolutely. And it takes you through the journey that all humankind must endure in confronting and battling against evil and confronting it and not turning away from it. Because you'll see in horror movies, when people try to deny or turn away from horror, they die. They're the first ones to die,
I totally agree with you about the whole jail thing. I vouch to you 1,000% on that. That is for sure. That is for sure. If they didn't want to do it, they wouldn't have done it. Plain and freaking simple. That's it.
Yeah, and a lot of really evil people, they get a big kick out of victimizing other people, watching them be afraid, watching them be sad, keep making them, reducing them to a childlike slave state. I mean, it's really horrible. It's really horrible.
Now, for you, working on this film with the great Bob Elmore, I love Bob to death, a great guy. How was working with him and Dennis Hopper on this one, of course? How was working with those guys? I know there was a great cast on this, but how was working with those guys?
I have said so many times that Bill Johnson and Bob Elmore sandwiched together made the perfect Leatherface. Because the physicality of Bob Elmore, who was so agile, and he was so, the guy's a professional athlete, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
He was so agile. He was so quick. He was so great with the saw. He knew exactly how to stage and execute the action scenes that we had together. And you have to have an actor who can run with a fully functioning running chainsaw at high rev. Because look, if Bill Johnson goes down with that saw in his hand, you lose your star and you're done. So you've got to have an expert like Bob Elmore to pull off the more physical aspects of that performance. Bill Johnson was hired for his eyes, for his ability to speak through his eyes. Leatherface has no dialogue. Leatherface doesn't speak. He's only just a physical presence and those eyes. And Bill Johnson has these sweet basset hound puppy dog eyes, and because his Leatherface falls in love with Stretch during the course of the movie, you've got to see that register in his eyes. And so in the close-up stuff and the more acted stuff, you've got Bill Johnson. In the heavy-duty action, running, jumping, fighting, you've got Bob Elmore, who is an absolute expert stuntman. So between the two, I think you got a nearly perfect Leatherface. You're never going to exceed Gunner, because Gunner had both of those things in perfect synchronicity. But to pull it off in number two, we had to have both of those guys. And I think it just came off perfectly. It came off beautifully. Dennis Hopper, he was one of my idols as an actor anyway, because I grew up on the films of Nick Ray. I grew up on the films of George Stevens. I grew up on Five Easy Pieces with Jack Nicholson. I grew up on Easy Rider. Dennis Hopper was as much a part of my cinematic history, my viewing history, as he is in movies itself. And just to be able to hear his stories and the creative universe that he lived within and moved within. He knew Miles Davis. He knew Thelonious Monk. He knew the Stones. He knew Martin Scorsese. He knew, like I said, George Stevens, Nick Ray. He knew James Dean. They were best friends. He knew Natalie Wood. And then into his, he was friends with Georgia O'Keeffe, the world-famous photographer, and her lover, Alfred Steichen. He had a ranch that adjoined theirs. And, just to hear him talk about the Monterey Pop Festival, just to hear him talk about, living and working all the myriad places that he had lived and worked in. And he was also a very generous soul. When we finished the film and I moved to L.A., he had given me his phone number and said, call me if you need anything. So I called him and I said, I'm having trouble getting an agent. He said, I'll take you to my agency. And he walked me through the door. He introduced me to them and said, you need to sign her. And they did.
Wow. That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. He then took me to a nightclub called Helena's. It was run by a Greek actress named Helena Kalyaniotis. She had been the beautiful brunette in Five Easy Pieces opposite Jack Nicholson, and they remained lifelong friends. And she operated this incredible nightclub in one of the worst parts of town that had a retractable roof. And in the wintertime, when you would drive to the club, you could hear the music from a mile away, and by the time you got close to it with that retractable roof, the sweat and the heat coming out of that nightclub would be rising into the air like steam. And you would walk in, and everybody was on that dance floor. I met Harry Dean Stanton, Warren Beatty, and Jack Nicholson all in the same night.
Damn.
And I danced with Michael Hutchence of In Excess.
Wow.
2 In Excess songs, along with George Michael, who was playing it straight in those days.
Jeez.
So I know it was the place to see and be seen, and the probably the most important guest that ever showed up there was Prince.
Oh,
and of course, the minute he walked through the door, they played Prince all night long. And it was really a heady time. The 80s were amazing in LA, and the early 90s. Tony Scott was making films, and Ridley Scott was beginning his career. Tony and Ridley were beginning their careers, and, shortly after I arrived here, I ended up doing Days of Thunder, and, it was just a brilliant time for movies because everybody was doing original stuff. Everybody was doing fun, great stuff, and horror was becoming ascendant. It was very We were beginning to find our place, you know, in the power profile in movies here in LA. So I feel very lucky that I got to do all the pictures that you named in your intro, and I feel very lucky that I get to do them now.
I was sure I'd love to have been out there in the 80s to see Guns N' Roses and Motley Crue and those guys at that time.
Oh my God.
I mean,
I know.
to know now.
Van Halen.
Oh yeah, Van Halen.
Van Halen at the Whiskey.
Oh,
I mean,
geez.
oh Jesus. I got to tell you. Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Those three bands are still on my list to get on my actual music show. So I'm trying.
Wishing you the best of luck. Do your best.
I'm not giving up. I'm not giving up.
Don't give up, man.
Guns N' Roses and Metallica, those two bands have, and the Misfits, they have foreverly changed my life. And I mean, Metallica saved my life when my dad was real sick. So I owe that band
oh yeah,
a huge amount of gratitude for sure.
Of course.
But
of course.
When it's all said and done at the end of days and everything, you sit around and what's it mean to you though, Caroline, to be part of one of horror's iconic franchises? I mean, honestly, you cannot talk horror movies without mentioning the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. There's no way.
Well, no, you can't. And the Texas Chainsaw Massacre was seminal. It changed horror films forever. It is in the top 100 American Film Institute films, Library of Congress best films. You know, it's Martin Scorsese names it as one of his principal inspirations to become a filmmaker. Steven Spielberg, the same. Most major filmmakers will name it in their top 10 as their top inspirations for wanting to become film directors or film writers, or going into horror. And it's even arguable to say to Martin Scorsese, you make horror films. These mob films are horror films, and they are. Mm-hmm. It's just the evil isn't a supernatural monster. It's human beings living in a neighborhood near you. You know, it's a real point of pride. Early in my career, I was embarrassed by it because when I first came to L.A., it was really I really took it on the chin out here. Agencies did not want to sign me because they felt the film was gross, that it was a humiliation for Dennis Hopper, that Tobe Hooper was never going to get out of doing gory horror films. They considered him a hack and a gory horror film, you know, carnival barker.
Wow.
They did not take him seriously as a filmmaker, but Steven Spielberg did, and that's how Tobe scored the movie Poltergeist, and did two more films with Spielberg after that. So, you know, they respected one another enormously as filmmakers. A lot of people don't know that, but it's true. That movie set me up for the rest of my life. It gave me an opportunity to prove myself. And to this day, it is the measure by which it's the standard by which I measure myself. I like doing the horror films, genre films, where I can be as athletic and as convincing and find a character to play who finds herself in as extraordinary a set of circumstances as that character did. And it's frequently hard to find scripts that reflect that. You know, most of them play it very safe because they're budget films. They can't afford to do a lot of location stuff and special effects. But the thing is if you stick to an 80s practical standard, all you end up doing is finding great artists who know how to create these amazing effects and these amazing sets and find these amazing locations to make these amazing films. I think there are more dollars available to horror film writers, producers, directors now than ever before, especially with the success of it. I know I'm getting tons of offers. I'm developing a couple of things that I'll hopefully go into production on soon. I've got 2 movies coming out hopefully soon.
Nice.
We've got Blood Feast, which is a remake of Herschel Gordon Lewis's 1963 film. And Heshy did do a lovely little cameo for us. Sadly, he turned 101 and died shortly thereafter, so he never actually got to see himself in our film. But It is a terrific remake. It's obviously got extravagantly more budget than Herschel was able to utilize in 1963. It stars Sophie Monk, who is the Bachelorette of Australia and one of the most popular cultural figures in Australia. She was also the star of The Hills Run Red, directed by My Tales of Halloween director, Dave Parker, who is a mega, 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 mega talent, and who I hope to work for again soon. Blood Feast has been going through the wars with the MPAA. We've had 6 different edit sessions to bring ourselves into alignment with what these idiots want. We've lost 5 minutes of the film. There will be a director's cut. I've seen it. It's everything the fans would want it to be. You'll probably have to settle for an R-rated version for a while, but that's okay. We will be out sometime this year. I can't say I know when, but sometime. I also did another movie for Eric England. Eric has formed a remarkable new production company with a wonderful man named Greg Blunden and his beautiful wife, Pamela. It's called Talk Story. And Talk Story is providing funding for first and second-time filmmakers who've been trying to find their budgets. Great filmmakers with great storytelling ability. And Eric has provided the launching pad for a terrific young director, Graham Denman. Graham co-wrote and developed a movie called Greenlight with Eric. And Eric, God bless him, loves me and always has something for me to do in his films. He's placed my character of Nancy at the centerpiece of Greenlight, and that will be coming out hopefully end of year, beginning of next year. But it's a real high-end, very beautifully done horror film that I'm incredibly proud of. I get to give the kind of performance that I love to give and work with the style of actors I love to work with, principal among them Chris Browning from Westworld. He's in a movie right now called The Last Rampage, written by a writer I adore named Chad Law. And Chris is an amazing actor. I had a great time with him on set. Victor Turpin is also in it, Nicole Shipley, Evan Friedman, and the incredible Chase Williamson. Chase is in everything. He's gorgeous, and he's funny, and he's great. And I look forward to everybody seeing that movie as well.
Caroline, do you think horror movies has lost some touch with the gore and slasher films out today? I mean, because they can do everything all CGI now, and would you like to see them go back to the old style of the horror films with more gore and more slasher, stuff like that?
Well, I know that they are, because the beauty of the convention circuit, unlike any other genre of film, when you're on the convention circuit, you are meeting your fans face to face. You're meeting the people that you're friends with on Facebook. You're meeting the people that you tweet with. You are fully accountable in real time to the fans who see your movies. And filmmakers know this too. The fans will come right out and tell you what they like and what they don't like, and what worked and what didn't work. And the number one complaint that fans have had now for gosh, I've been doing the circuit for 10 years now. I've been going to conventions for 10 years now. The number one complaint that they've had for the 10 years I've been doing it is we want our practical effects back. We love the sculpture. We love the artistry. We love the work that goes into creating all those special effects. We know, we understand and appreciate the significance of that. We like our practicals. We want to see things happening in front of our faces. And everybody's going back to that. Blood Feast is 100% practical effects created by the gruesome twosome, Ryan Nicholson and his fabulous wife, Megan Nicholson. Just a 2-man special effects crew. And I can tell you that the special effects on Blood Feast are probably the most realistic that I've ever seen. These are 2 people who know their game, and they were on this movie. And you will not be disappointed by what you see. You've got great story, you've got terrific actors, and some interesting and wonderful European locations that we were really lucky to get in on. And I think the fans are really going to embrace this movie.
You know, I just like to say as a fan, thank you and Bob and all you guys from Texas Chainsaw, because I got to meet you and Bob at Scarefest a couple years ago, right before Tales of Poe was coming out. And it's very cool to meet you guys. But when you see fans lined up at these conventions to talk to you about Texas Chainsaw or any other of these horror movies that you've been in, what's it mean to you at the end of the day when you see this and talk to them?
Well, like I said, I mean, our customer base come out to see us. They come out to tell us what they like, what they don't like. But, you know, I've actually worked for a couple of young filmmakers who came out to meet me at conventions and festivals, who were working on getting their resumes together and getting their budgets together. Mm-hmm. And then when they did, came up with films for me to act in. Because most people that go to conventions, they're either writers, sculptors, costume makers, makeup artists, actors, writers, directors, producers, editors, composers. We've got our own music. Our culture is entirely unique, and it's now becoming the mainstream. Even all the tattoos, the tattoo culture is now becoming very mainstream.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
when you look at what's offered on television, Walking Dead, what is it, American Horror Story.
Yeah.
When you look at all the stuff that's on television now, we are going mainstream. People are now following us. So, I think it was just an inevitable result,
And for you folks, and I'm talking to all you movie stars out there. I don't care if you get mad at me when I say this or not, but if you, back away from saying that you was in a horror movie when you first started and back away from it, you don't deserve to be acting. That's my thought.
Well,
that's me. I'm sorry.
The thing is the time. I do believe the times have changed enough, because Renee Zellweger, there was a time when she would never even refer or acknowledge that she had been in Chainsaw 4.
Or Matthew McConaughey.
She would not even acknowledge, or Matthew McConaughey. They don't do that anymore. They actually seem to take a little bit of pride in the fact that they are part of the Chainsaw family. And Renee Zellweger gave an interview not too long ago, maybe it was Vanity Fair, where she talked very affectionately about her experience working on that film, her love of Austin, Texas, where she lives now, and her friendship with Matthew McConaughey, and how it has endured the test of time. So, she may have been avoiding her horror background and past, not necessarily because she wanted to, but because her reps wanted her to. Because mainstream Hollywood never changes. They're snobs. They will never embrace us. I mean, they embrace it. They embrace certain very, very high budget Blumhouse stuff. Indies are still considered to be upstarts, and indies are still considered to be kind of roughnecks and scalawags. So, respect for the indie producer director might be hard to find, but as the genre as a whole, I think we're making headway.
Here's the $1 million question: what is your favorite part about Halloween growing up? What was your favorite part about it?
Well, I mean, it was so different back in the day when I was a little girl, because our parents didn't go with us. They weren't following behind us. We were out on our own, and we're dressed up, and I can't tell you how different it was. I mean, I grew up like Scout from To Kill a Mockingbird. All we had were street lights and the headlights of passing cars. So we were just incredibly free as children when I was a kid. It was just so different. It was so different. There's no comparison. There's no comparison.
I want to thank you for taking time out to do this interview with me here on the 6th annual BODS Mayhem Hour Halloween special. It's truly an honor to have you on here, and thank you guys for what you've done for us horror folks.
Well, listen, I thank you so much for inviting me and including me, and I apologize for the impossible length of time it took to finally get it done. But the invitation came in the middle of one of the most active periods that I've had in a couple of years. So,
I start early, and I usually start around July. So I was like, I got to start now.
There you go.
Hey,
I appreciate you having me. It was so much fun.
That's awesome. Before I let you go, would you care to do a promo for the show?
Okay. Hi, this is Caroline Williams of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. Happy Halloween from BODS Mayhem Hour.
Everybody stick around. We got some great, great music coming up, and you only hear these interviews right here on BODS Mayhem Hour, New City Radio. Get off your butts, get your kids out and about, get them some candy, have some fun. Live it up, folks. Let them have some fun during Halloween. And you only hear these interviews right here on BODS Mayhem Hour. Thanks, Caroline.
Thank you, sweetie. Have a great Halloween.
Now you're the golden.